Thank you for joining us. My family and I started Bring Change to Mind 10 years ago to end the stigma and discrimination surrounding mental illness. Our mission was simple: to start the conversation. We've worked to promote open conversation ever since. From depression to bipolar disorder to post-traumatic stress, mental illness affects 1 in 4 adults and 1 in 5 children. We simply need to talk about it, dispel ignorant, destructive myths, and create empathy. Too many people are afraid to seek help. Bring Change to Mind creates safe and stigma-free peer-to-peer high school clubs where students learn about mental health, to listen and support each other, and are given the tools for self-care and wellness. Over the coming weeks and months, students will be reintegrating with their peers and returning to campuses for the first time in 14 months. We can help them and ourselves by listening without judgment, by starting and continuing courageous, supportive conversations in our home and with our friends. Tonight's discussion is an opportunity to address how mental health intersects with other critical issues that face our society. You will hear authentic and candid conversations. Our goal is to show that everyone deals in one way or another with mental health because we're human. My family and I have learned that where there is conversation, there is hope. For being with us tonight, thank you.
Hello, I'm Javier Muñoz, actor, activist, and this is Conversations with Bring Change to Mind in partnership with People. Bring Change to Mind is a national organization dedicated to ending the stigma and discrimination surrounding mental health and mental illness by encouraging dialogue and hopefully thereby raising awareness, understanding, and empathy. The APA has stated, and I quote, "Racial, ethnic, gender, and sexual minorities often suffer from poor mental health outcomes due to multiple factors, including inaccessibility of high-quality mental health care services, cultural stigma surrounding mental health care, discrimination, and overall lack of awareness about mental health." And at this particular moment, after a historic year of reckoning and isolation, we are exploring the intersection between race and mental health. And today, I am here with an unbelievable, incredible group of people who have all broken down barriers in meaningful, powerful ways, both personally and publicly. TV personality and entrepreneur, Matt James. Hello, welcome. Don Lemon, CNN anchor and author of This Is the Fire, that book just right off his shoulder. Musician, writer, and advocate, MILCK. Welcome. And actress, singer, activist, MJ Rodriguez. Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. I'm just going to say this to everyone who's watching. I'm just going to start with a trigger warning right away. We sort of dive right in head first in the deep end of the pool, and it'll probably bring up some personal experiences that might trigger some of your own personal traumas. And so at this point, before we begin the conversation, I just wanted to give that warning out there now. So yes, folks, the first question, we're really diving in. There is cultural stigma that surrounds mental health. Stigma that surrounds just asking for help. Stigma that perpetuates judgment on someone who is seeking mental health self-care. You combine that, you couple that with systemic institutional racism. One of the leading causes of anxiety and depression and trauma for Black, Indigenous people of color. Combine those two. How did you experience in your childhood, in your family, in school, in your communities, how did you experience this? And two-part question, was mental health something that your family was open to discussing? And I'm going to direct this first in order of the people on my screen. I'm going to start with you, Matt, please.
Thank you, Javier. That was a great question. And I think that we've minimized mental health symptoms so that we receive a lack of care. And that's something that I think I didn't understand until I got older. When I was younger, a lot of things were dismissed as disruptiveness, a myriad of other things that, looking back, should have been diagnosed properly. And with that misdiagnosis, you have students, boys and girls who are going untreated for things that could have very well been attended to at a young age. And the things that we should be seeking in terms of avenues to support what we're going through and what we're dealing with weren't normalized when I was that age and growing up, education around going to see a counselor, education around going to see a therapist, to the point where I received a bunch of criticism for a tweet after the airing of a show I was just on about looking for a therapist in the area. And people are like, why would you be looking for a therapist? And it just gave me a temperature of the country and where one, from a standpoint of men and their view on what is and isn't acceptable and where we should be seeking help. And it's on people like us who have a voice and can create spaces for people to do and act on these things that they should be acting on to receive the care they need.
Thank you for that. And I'm going to move this over to you, Don.
Well, growing up, I personally didn't have to deal with, I don't think, mental health issues, but I did have to, directly, I should say, but indirectly. I've had people in my family who were bipolar, but then growing up, no one knew what bipolar was, right? There wasn't a name for it. They were just like, oh, this person is crazy. And then they would, sort of ostracize them and push them to the side. I personally had to deal with holding a secret about being gay, and that did affect, I would say, my mental health, but not in a sense where I have to go and seek, medication or anything like that. But I think I always had sort of a low grade depression, and I isolated myself as a child because I was holding this secret that I didn't want people to know about. And had if we were more open about it, if there was no stigma around that issue and around the issue of mental health, I probably would have seen a therapist when I was a child. But, when growing up in the South, especially a Black family, you didn't do that. It was like the only therapist you needed was God, or you go see your preacher, or you tried to pray the gay away. So those are the things that I had to deal with. But then in adult life, I had to deal with people who were very close to me who dealt with bipolar issues and other issues. And by the time that I became an adult, in my 30s, I finally got a therapist and had to deal with some issues around being discriminated against and being profiled, and actually in public, and the police coming and thinking that it was me instead of that I was the perpetrator, yet I was the one who called police, and it just really threw my world for a loop. And then once I started going to therapy, there was no turning back. I was like, why haven't I done this before? But as you know, if you watch me on CNN, I often have conversations, very candid conversations about mental health and about taking the stigma off of mental health and about taking the stigma off of being marginalized people or members of the LGBTQ community or minorities or issues that women face or any underserved member of a community faces in this not only in this country, in this world. So that's my experience with it. I work very diligently to take those stigmas off, and I hope that comes across, and I actually hope that it makes a difference every day on television.
Thank you so much, Don. I'm going to move you over to MILCK, please.
The best name on this thing.
Right?
That's a fact.
Yeah, it's actually my last name backwards and my first two initials. And that's part of my story, too. My last name's Lim. My heritage being a Chinese American woman, growing up in a family of two immigrant parents from Hong Kong who held on to pretty traditional values was a unique experience. I think one of my songs that addresses the sexual assault that happened to me when I was younger. We're going right in, guys. Get the scuba gear out. We're going deep. That song was a product of like going to therapy. Finally, I really related to Dawn, some of you, what you were saying. Well, first of all, I also have bipolar people in my family as well. And we didn't really know what that was either until one of my aunts, like took a step to say, like, going to a therapist is okay. And some of these conversations started happening. But when I came forward to share about my story and I was asking for help after the assault, there was no language or dialogue or vocabulary even for my family to understand that it wasn't my fault. It was just immediately was this shaming, unintentional. My family loves me, but they didn't know how to react. And so I was 14 at that time, it became my fault. And then I carried for probably 14 years this story that there's something broken within me and there's something wrong with me. And I would keep people at a distance. And I related to Dawn, what you said about low grade depression, having that, and also like isolating as well. And finally going to therapy, where I learned, like 14 years later, a few things that I had never said in my life. That was wrong. It wasn't my fault, and I needed help. And I had never asked for help until I was 28 or so. That asking for help completely opened everything up, which helped me write the song called Quiet. It became like a anthem of sorts for the Women's March and the Me Too movement, and helped me understand I wasn't alone. But it took art. Like, I really needed to lean into creativity to break through my status quo that I was given so I'm really like a big believer in leaning into imagination and creativity to help break through whatever conditions we're given.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for that. And finally, MJ, please.
So I would say, as far as race combined with mental capacity, my life is quite layered. Not only am I trans, but I'm Afro-Latina. So I'm African-American and I'm also Latina. And one of my biggest hurdles as a child, before even addressing my transness, was my ethnicity. I lived for a big part of my life until 11 years old or 10 years old in a very predominantly Caucasian area. And there were moments where I realized, even at a very young age, that I started to assimilate to a culture that was not mine. And the moment I realized that maybe I should have not been assimilating, or the moment I should have not been trying to gear myself closer to it, is when I had the N-word written on our garage door. That's the moment I realized and knew. I had already had an understanding of being a person of color, but that's when I knew that I was of a marginalized community and that I was a Black woman, a Black kid, a Black trans individual. And as time went on, I just had this in the back of my head, and even that alone can create some kind of mental strain on you. And it's still lived with me until today. I mean, I commend each and every last one of you on here, because you do take the initiative to go and talk to someone, and as far as a therapist goes. And I'm still working on that. That's still a hurdle that I have to get over, because sometimes I think I'm just too strong, but in reality, sometimes we need somebody to talk to. But having that strain on my mind, along with being someone who was a part of a community who, like you said, Milk, didn't even have the vernacular, didn't have the vocabulary to really speak about it, that created even more of a mental block for me. So I would encourage anyone who is dealing with both racial circumstances as well as being a part of the LGBTQAI community, it's important, like everyone else said on here, to go and have conversations with a therapist, and make sure that you find groups of people that you feel closest to, especially the youth. I mean, they're the ones right now who are the most fragile and the most vulnerable. And I mean, one of the biggest organizations that I love is GLSEN, because that's a space where younger people can call up and talk about their their problems or talk about what they're going through. That's pretty much what I have to say about it. It's a fight that we always have to continue to keep fighting.
Hey, Javier, can I ask a question?
Yes, of course, please.
So MJ, because I'm sorry, I'm an interviewer, so I have to ask. And Milk, I didn't mention the abuse that I suffered at the hands of a neighbor, and I should have, because that was a big part of my secret and isolation. But MJ, let me ask you this. The thing that forced me into therapy was when I was profiled, right, in the middle of a street in Philadelphia in broad daylight. People are watching, right, and I'm not the TV guy on television. And I'm like, oh my gosh, it was just a terrible situation. And so that forced me into therapy. I had a mindset just like you about not wanting to go to therapy. Why haven't you gone? Why won't you go see someone?
I think it's the sad stereotype that has been probably conflicted on every African American culture. It's just something that we don't go to because we feel like we don't need it. And I guess it's been, like we've all talked about, systemically ingrained in our bodies that we shouldn't go to it, but yet and still there are cultures that go to it all the time and that rely on it. I think that's what was initially inside of me, and I'm working on it. I'm trying my best to make sure I do it. Sometimes, like I said, I think I'm so strong that I don't need it. And that's just not the truth. We all need someone to talk to. So, Don, honestly, I think that's the reason why I haven't. And
are you going to? Is there anything we can do to convince you to go?
Yeah, I mean, anything you can do, I'm down for convincing, and I definitely want to start as soon as possible because, child, things are getting crazy, and a girl needs it. She needs it.
Well, actually, to springboard off of everything you all just said, particularly you, MJ, I want to sort of segue into a conversation about safe spaces. In Hamilton, when we opened and we were these stage full of people of color trying to tell an American story of absolutely our white founders, and the backlash that we got from that was just the beginning, just the tip of the iceberg of what would become a sort of snowball effect of anything that we shared publicly as a cast about our lives individually became a target. And so really creating that theater as a safe space for all of us to come into was sacred. And having our safe spaces outside of that was even more sacred. And so my question to you all is, why do you think safe spaces are so, personally, why do you think they're so important for mental health? And where do you feel most safe? And I'm going to go backwards. So I'm going to start with you, MJ, on that one.
Well, I will say this, Javier, the musical theater space is definitely one of the greatest spaces to be and feel most comfortable and feel the safest in. And I would say more than anything for me, with, doing film and television, spaces that are more inclusive when it comes to diversity. I'm a huge person on understanding people of different walks of lives and getting to know them, as well as them opening space to get to know me so that we can make it easier for the next people that come in after us, or open up the conversation for the people who have always been there, who've never wanted to have it. So for me, the most safest spaces for me, even though it may seem uncomfortable, is a space of diversity, because you can have the conversations. And yes, sometimes you may have to, ruffle some feathers, but the fact that there's different people from different walks of life, they're able to chime in versus it being just one person over here or one person over here. So for me, yes, musical theater, spaces of diversity. And also in general, the LGBTQAI community. I mean, there's a lot of open outlets. One, the New York City Center, LGBTQAI Center, that's another safe space where everyone goes to, not just LGBTQ members go to, but people outside of the community go to, because it feels like a safe haven. It feels like a place where you can just let down your hair and have conversations about things that you probably wouldn't be able to have in the workspace. So, those are the safe spaces for me.
I love that. How about you, Milk? I'll move this over to you.
Yeah. Well, first off, I want to say, MJ, I am a big Nurse Jackie fan, and I remember your performance on there.
Oh, you remember that? Oh, snap!
It was so great because it helped me see another side of what it's like to be a trans person, and your performance was so great. It was very likable on that. So I want to echo that. the diverse spaces and art that is aiming to tell stories are so powerful. For me, I feel like safe spaces are important. I was talking to someone close to me, and he had a problem with the word. He's like, I hear safe space all over the place. What is this? And I said, I think being born into this system that we didn't choose, there's a sense of feeling this like pushing in, like even I live in Los Angeles, right? And there's ads everywhere. There's messages. There's these things that are pulling and pushing at us. And like to create a bubble of space is so meaningful to us because we need it. I think we are actually these wild beings, and we're these animals, right? Like that we need that open space. And so I feel that's to me why that word is coming up. And I was trying to explain to my friend, like, this word is very sacred. These words, safe space, are sacred to us because we're searching for them. And what makes me feel safe is being around people who are willing to be vulnerable. And I love this type of conversation. I'm not good at small talk. I just like going right in. And that makes me feel really safe when I meet people who are willing to just let it all be imperfect and messy. Yeah.
That's amazing. Thank you so much. Don, you're up, sir.
Well, for me, it's going to, I know, so Milk, this is going to ring familiar to you because I have an issue with safe spaces. I don't really like the term safe spaces. For me, the safest place to be is in an uncomfortable situation. My safe space is actually in front of the camera. I mean, when I sit in front of the camera, it's so weird. I started noticing this during the pandemic. When I sat in front of the camera, it gave me, I felt self-possessed. I felt a sense of autonomy. And I felt like, thank God I have this platform because so many people don't. So I need to speak for the people with a platform. But I certainly understand, MJ, a safe space is in therapy, okay? And I do believe that there should be, so I don't like the word, that's in general, I don't like safe spaces, especially, when you're, I think the best thing to do to make you a stronger, tougher person sometimes is to confront issues head on and to confront your detractors and enemies head on, because it gives you, it just gives you a sense of freedom and accomplishment. Like, yeah, I took that on and now I'm good. I can stand in this space and be myself. But I certainly understand that that some people do need those spaces, and those spaces can be therapy. It can be, AA. It can be, any sort of addiction prevention group or whatever it is. It can be your family, and it can be places too in schools where like-minded people come together. But I feel safer, quite honestly, when I'm confronting people about issues. So being in front of the camera is a perfect place for me to be able to do that, and that's where I feel the safest.
That's really awesome.
And we're all lucky for it. We're all better for it. Thank you,
Yeah.
Don. Truly.
I don't know if everybody would agree with that, but thank you.
And so maybe it's like it's a balance. It's like a both and, right? Like having safe spaces so that we can go into the uncomfortable places like you do all the time for the American public. I think that's important too, and I like that acknowledgement. Yeah.
I'm going to throw this over to you, Matt, if you'd like to answer this as well, please.
Yes. I would say that I try to err on the approach that Don's taken in terms of being in an uncomfortable space, because once you put yourself in that situation, you just gain a confidence from it, and it allows other people to empathize with you like they can with MJ and Milk through their performances and through their music. And that's what safe space is for me. It's being vulnerable, like Milk discussed, and allowing someone to feel what you've been through and open up a place for them to have that similar conversation. And that's why I think Don's so good at his job, is because he's so vulnerable and upfront about what he's been through, what he's going through, and where he's going. It allows people who are going through similar things to relate on that common ground and have a discussion with them, being as it's on a national stage. There's not a more public way to have that conversation. So him taking that leap and allowing other people to see, hey, if someone's going through what I'm going through, and is that comfortable talking about it? Like maybe I should be open to that type of dialogue. And that's what I try to do on a granular basis when I have conversations with people who are going through a handful of things, just telling them, trying to find common ground and share things that I've been through with the hopes of them opening up and having a breakthrough.
I'm going to hop on your answer there with another question, Matt. Because I've spent the day researching all of you, by the way, because I know you all, but like I really wanted to be prepared for this. So I was looking, I was looking at the organizations that you've been so passionately creating and working to manifest since your show, and your entrepreneurship is just, it's amazing, it's inspiring, and it's clear that you're to me that you are finding where the need is and targeting that need directly. And so my question is specifically regarding mental health practices and services. What would you like to see in these communities that you're already working in? What would you like to see them have more access to regarding mental health services?
I think that there needs to be conversations about the various forms that are accessible. I think a lot of it, like Milk alluded to and MJ and Donna both spoke to, is that there wasn't even vernacular for them growing up to discuss and have conversation around what they were going through. And the education piece for me is key. And where do we have the most access to the next generation of thinkers, change makers, and the future is our school system. So having those conversations early and often about how to access a counselor, how to access a therapist, education around and against stigmas, mainstream discussions around depression in its various forms, as everyone on the calls alluded to, things that I wish I would have had access to and been a part of, so that I could drive people in the right direction. And there's programs out there, and it takes it being normalized from people like us having conversations around it, so that it's not, it's like, oh, Milk's doing this, or oh, MJ, look at MJ, she decided to go to therapy. Like maybe I should go to therapy. It's like, and sharing those stories with the people who follow us, so that it's a movement and it's a ripple effect.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much. I'm actually now going to focus on you, Don. You are someone I've turned to so often to receive the news, to receive the updates, to receive what's happening in our daily lives, and focusing specifically on young people. How do you think we can mitigate the mental health impact on the youth who are watching and seeing all of these recent viral moments of racism, which are often deadly, in our country?
Well, I think that the best place to start with anything, I think, is with honesty. And I think it's with an open mind and an open heart. And so, especially if you're speaking to young people are more resilient and they're smarter and tougher than we give them credit for. And I think all people are, but especially young people. I mean, young people today, they deal with things in a way that I was never able to deal with when I was a young person. I look at my nephews now, my great nephews and my nieces, and they're so strong and they're so worldly. And I think it's because obviously they live in an age where information is abundant and they see everything in front of them, and it's a much more open society. But I think the best way to do it is to start with honesty and to start by listening. And that is allowing people to ask questions. And when someone asks a question, I think that is an automatic entree into a conversation and to actually a solution. I was just speaking to someone about when to start talking to kids about race, right? And Dr. Beverly Tatum said to me, my daughter came home from school and she said, is my skin black or is my skin darker because I drink chocolate milk? That's the perfect time to start talking to a kid about race because they're asking a question about it. So I think the way to mitigate that is ask people in, listen, ask them if they have a question, and then listen, and then answer, and then the conversation begins. That's simple.
just to after all of this conversation, what gives you hope? What gives you joy? What gives you rest? What are the strengths that you found from your challenges? And how do you think we all move forward in and with hope?
What gives me hope is conversations like this, people like you. What gives me joy is actually talking about it and being able to express my feelings and fully as an American, as a truly emancipated person, and being able to listen to people like MJ and Milk and Matt share their deepest concerns and worries, and to be vulnerable, and to be able to try to convince people like MJ to go to therapy. And
He is
just
not going to let up on me with
good,
this therapy,
honest,
y'all.
I know, just good, honest discussion that ultimately leads to change. And that's what I'll say. That's what gives me joy.
What gives me hope is knowing that the pain that we go through in life helps us helps us grow into the individuals we need to be. So I've just like surrendered to reality that there's going to be times where life is hard and it's going to kick me. and then there's going to be times where I take those lessons to discover new things and perhaps have some joy. So I've let go. What gives me hope is the knowledge that hardships do lead to growth. What gives me joy is I've been doing this thing where I wake up in the morning, I play one song because I want to give myself a little bits of time, and I just dance. And I'm in LA right now. I was in Memphis for a bit, and the trees in Memphis are huge and big because there's an aquifer underneath. And so I go clubbing with the trees and the birds in the morning and just like dance. And that gives me joy. What gives me rest is, oh man, I just wrote a song called Slow Me Down because I think that it's an active revolution to take our time in a world that is constantly rushing us. And that rushing is internalized within me too. So I'm really trying to decolonize my mind so that I'm like changing my values, like what's important to me. And I'm really assessing that right now in my 30s. Like, do I need to accomplish A, B, and C to feel worthy, or can I let that go and just like breathe? I'm trying to do that and be honest with myself, because I think a lot of my ambitions have come from my own traumas of not feeling enough. So I've like dove into show business wanting to feel seen and heard. And now that I've fallen in love, I have a partner and I do feel seen and heard. My ambitions are softening in a way. And I kind of like that. You know, I never thought I thought when I was younger, I was like, no, I'm going to be a career woman, not going to have children. I'm just going to go for it. And now I'm kind of softening. And I think that's great. I'm just kind of letting it be.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much. Matt, I'll move this over to you now, please.
What gives me hope personally is the work that I do with students and the next generation, and seeing the initiative they've taken and how inquisitive they are and questioning everything. And then looking back on my life and seeing where I was when I was in their position, and how much their brains and thoughts and their ideation has come such a long way from what people were interested in, where they were devoting their time, and how we have this next generation of thought and change makers who are trailblazing the way. That gives me hope. What gives me rest is connecting with other people who, like MJ, like Milk, like yourself, Javier, who are going through similar things, and let me know that I'm not alone. I'm not the only one who's existing in this space. And it just builds a sense of community on the back of a time where we were all so isolated. So more conversations like this are really important to me.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much. And MJ, you're up.
Well, you know, I was going to steal that from that, but my thought also, as far as what gives me hope, is obviously the next generation as well. I love how rambunctious, how rebellious, how informed they are, and how just not defiant in a bad way, but defiant when it comes to justice and making sure that it happens. I love what they're doing now. I mean, like Matt said, I was in a time, I mean, I'm still young, but the young ones is, they 14 and 15. And, at that time, I didn't have the angst to go out and protest like how they're doing. Like they're out there and they're fighting. And I'm so glad that there is not only an outsource of television and media to really show them what's going on, but I know for a fact that some of their parents are actually encouraging them. So I'm really hopeful for them. And more importantly, what a lot of people wouldn't expect from me as far as hope goes is the older generation. I hope that they learn from the mistakes that have been institutionalized all the way down to the younger generations, and now learning this is what happens when change comes about. Are you going to take part of it, or are you going to stay complacent? I have hope for them, and knowing that they won't stay complacent. I have hope that they will move forward with us, because we're not doing this we're not doing it for the bad. We're doing it for the good. And what gives me rest is my meditation, honey. I love to meditate. I love when my spirit is at peace. I love when I can listen to some music that sends me to another realm, sends my mind to another space. When I'm dealing with so much that's happening in the world and also business-wise, I just have to make sure I center myself. I take 20 minutes out of my time and I check on me, because who else is going to check on me? And I think I'm the only person that can do that. And once I can do that for myself, then maybe somebody else can help me out, but that's the most important thing for me. So that's what gives me rest.
Oh, you are all amazing. I can't even begin to say. I think I'm gonna try to add these two questions in the last few minutes that we have, and I'll target them so that we can save a little time. And I'm going to say, MILCK, what do you think is one daily action that everyone who's watching right now can do to champion equity, health equity, mental health equity?
What everyone can do to help increase the peace on this planet is to slow down and think, and that's it. Just even if it's for 1 minute. Just slowing down to look at our surroundings, to breathe. MJ was talking about meditation, which is it's changed my life. I've actually stopped, I've been so busy, I've stopped. So that's when I need to meditate actually. But so I'm telling this advice because I need to tell myself. I'm actually just talking to myself right now. But I think if we all slowed down, I think maybe we could feel a little less rushed to categorize people, to put labels, we're just rushing and trying to survive, and okay, that person is a nerd, that person is athletic. We categorize to save time. But what if we took time to look at someone and ask ourselves, what are the nuances of this person that I'm not seeing right now? Maybe we would hurt each other less and be kinder. I just think so time is it, man. I just think it's the best thing. And it's the most fragile thing for all of us.
Thank you so much. All right, y'all. I'm going to wrap this up now, and just a heartfelt thank you to you all for an absolutely open, honest, and extremely generous conversation. Thank you so very much for joining us today, for being here. Thank you all for watching, and everyone, take care.
Hi. I'm Zach Williams, and thank you for joining us. I'm a board member of Bring Change to Mind and a mental health advocate. I came to this work after I lost my father. I really struggled with his death. It is so important to talk about mental health and to end stigma. I encourage you to join us in having open and honest conversations about mental health. It can be simple. Ask a family member, friend, or neighbor how they are doing. Listen without judgment. Share your own story and be vulnerable. Everyone can be a part of this movement of change. Let's talk about mental health and save lives. Visit bringchangetomind.org to get involved. Thank you.
Thanks to everyone for tuning in to Conversations with Bring Change to Mind on such an important topic. I'm Dan Wakeford, the Editor-in-Chief of People. Almost all of us know or love someone affected by mental illness or have dealt with it ourselves. Bring Change to Mind and People's Let's Talk About It initiative, which I launched in October 2019, is the perfect partnership because we share a common goal: to destigmatize this sensitive topic, to provide resources about where to get help, and to offer support to help anyone in need. I believe in the power of storytelling, touching people's hearts and opening their minds. I wanted to shape our campaign around stories from regular folks as well as celebrities who have dealt with mental illness. People's Alliance with the Crisis text line has also helped hundreds in their time of need. If you or someone you know need mental health help, text STRENGTH to the Crisis text line at 741 741 to be connected to a certified crisis counsellor. Just talking about how you feel helps. In other words, saying, "Let's talk about it," can be a powerful first step to healing.